thank you again. I am thrilled to be here. It is a real honor to be with you all this evening and to talk through some really exciting, collaborative, and ongoing work, which is Drawdown Georgia. So here's what I hope to accomplish this evening. I'm going to provide a little backstory of how Drawdown Georgia came to be. And as you'll see, it's a project that's really rooted in research. So I'm going to walk through the research methodology. So what assumptions and frameworks underpin this work? I'll highlight what we found and then walk through a few examples that allow us to really dig in. And finally, talk about what's next and how this research-based initiative is working to support the scaling of solutions out in the real world. So first, the inspiration. So Drawdown Georgia was directly inspired by the work of Project Drawdown. Project Drawdown was first a New York Times bestselling book and is now a nonprofit organization. The book has this catchy subtitle of the most comprehensive plan ever proposed to reverse global warming. And it highlighted about 100 climate solutions that could be deployed to reach a state that they coined as drawdown, which is when levels of CO2 in the atmosphere stop climbing and actually start to decline. It's an inspiring list of solutions that includes traditional engineering solutions like solar power and electric vehicles, as well as social solutions like educating more women and girls. Many people, including myself, were really inspired by this solutions first framing to carbon mitigation. But there's one thing that a reader can't do with this book. So it takes a truly global perspective, and therefore it does not provide a roadmap for any particular locality about what a city or state or region should do to reduce its emissions. So in this way, it is a real inspiration, but not a real handbook for local change. So enter Drawdown Georgia, which I'll be talking with you about today. And this project provides that translation from a set of global solutions to a roadmap for Georgia. I had the privilege of serving on the Drawdown Georgia research team through some work I did with Emory University. And now I'm working with the Ray C. Anderson Foundation to support this next phase of work, which is really focused on scaling solutions in the state. For those who aren't familiar with the Ray C. Anderson Foundation, I'm going to pause quickly and just tell you about it for a moment. So we're a family foundation here in Georgia that started about 10 years ago to honor the legacy of Ray C. Anderson. So Ray founded a successful carpet tile company called Interface, and he championed this notion of business doing well by doing good. And among other things, really turned his focus to environmental stewardship and sustainability. The foundation now works to carry on those values. And as part of that effort, the Ray C. Anderson Foundation has been the primary funder of Drawdown Georgia to date. So in 2018, a group of researchers from Georgia Tech, University of Georgia, Emory University, and Georgia State embarked on this research journey to answer the question, which of those 100 solutions identified by Project Drawdown are most applicable to Georgia? Here's a snapshot of some of the research team. This picture obviously was taken pre-COVID, no masks in sight. And it's of researchers as well as some key community leaders who contributed their time and expertise to the work. And I'll note that the research was led by Dr. Marilyn Brown from Georgia Tech. So how did we evaluate these solutions to see what was most applicable to Georgia? So the research team took that list of about 100 climate solutions from Project Drawdown's global analysis as the jumping off point. We then ran each solution through a series of filters. Is the solution relevant to the state? Will it be ready at scale by 2030? Is there sufficient local experience? Can the solution deliver 1 million metric tons of annual CO2 reduction by 2030 in Georgia? And we'll come back and talk a little bit more about this measure of 1 million metric tons. Is it cost competitive with other solutions in its sector? The team also considered what we called beyond carbon impacts, looking at how solutions could impact things beyond carbon emissions, such as public health, equity, the larger environment, and jobs, particularly as these solutions scale in the state. Doing so, the team winnowed down that 100 Project Drawdown solutions to 20 high impact solutions to reduce emissions in the state by 2030. And here they are. This is the list of the 20 Drawdown Georgia solutions. As you can see, they span 5 key sectors. So electricity, building and materials, food and agriculture, land sinks, and transportation. They contain some of the usual suspect solutions like building more solar, replacing gasoline-powered vehicles with electric vehicles, and investing in energy efficiency by retrofitting existing buildings. It also contains some solutions that may surprise you, such as reducing food waste or increasing composting. Finally, you'll see that most of the solutions would decrease our sources of carbon emissions, but the 3 land sink solutions are actually about increasing our natural sequestration of carbon dioxide through trees and vegetation and soil. So how did that filtering system actually work? I think this chart is really helpful to get a sense of where solutions fell out of consideration, although I admit it's a little hard to read. If you can see the small font, solutions in the top grouping like autonomous vehicles and carbon capture and storage, they were found to be not technology or market ready in Georgia. These were solutions that were just unlikely to deploy in the state by 2030 to levels required to make a meaningful carbon reduction. The next 6 solutions were dropped when local experience was considered. This includes things like offshore wind and wave and tidal energy. Local experience became yet another proxy for determining whether a solution could be meaningfully deployed in the state by 2030. I want to pause here and emphasize that this is not to say that the team did not value these solutions or the state should not pursue some of these solutions. Instead, it's really a product of the question we asked. What can Georgia do today with the solutions ready to go now to make the biggest carbon reductions in the state? If our analytic frame had been a 2040 or a 2050 timeframe, some of those solutions may have stayed in. So the fact that we're looking at 2030 is really important to keep top of mind. Okay, on to the third section. The largest number of solutions dropped out at this 1 megaton requirement, which is, can a solution reduce 1 million metric tons or a megaton of carbon dioxide equivalent a year by 2030? Solutions missed this threshold for a variety of reasons. A new nuclear plant, for example, is just unlikely to be sited, approved, built, and turned on in the next 10 years. Others, such as telepresence, are unlikely to be able to contribute on this megaton reduction scale in Georgia in this time frame. So I should note that for some solutions like telepresence, we ended up bundling them into groups of similar solutions that together could meet this threshold. So telepresence is part of the alternative mobility solution, along with things like e-bikes and bike infrastructure and walkable cities. We did a similar thing for retrofitting and recycling. That next block that has 3 solutions, they were down selected for just being too costly compared with other solutions in their sector. This includes things like concentrated solar. So you may have noticed that this chart does not include all 100 Project Drawdown solutions. There was a group that was set aside without much analysis if the solution was deemed out of scope. So for example, preserving tropical forests were dropped because there are no real tropical rainforests in the state, or improving cook stoves, since people don't typically cook over an open fire here. So for each of those 20 high impact solutions that were identified, the research team then estimated what a 1 megaton CO2 reduction would look like here in Georgia. And to get a sense of how meaningful a 1 megaton reduction would be, the state of Georgia has a net carbon footprint of about 125 million metric tons. So for these estimates, we captured just how many solar panels we'd need to install, or how many EVs would need to replace conventional gasoline-powered cars. Here are just 3 examples. You would need 295,000 new 5 kilowatt home solar systems by 2030. Or you could divert 2 million metric tons of organic waste from a landfill to composting, or eliminate 2.5% of car trips. You can explore all of these megaton estimates on the Drawdown Georgia website, which is drawdowngA.org. Okay, so how much carbon reduction can these 20 solutions achieve in Georgia by 2030? The research team modeled how emissions could fall if all solutions were deployed to ambitious but achievable levels. They found that this could cut the state's carbon emissions by about 35% in 2030, from 122 million metric tons to 79 million metric tons. It's important to note that for many of the solutions, they have the technical ability to cut emissions much deeper. So this is by no means the maximum emissions reduction pathway. It is, however, an ambitious but achievable one. We've put up an interactive wedge graph that looks similar to this on the Drawdown Georgia website that actually lets you play with this data and create customized projections. And I would encourage all of you to take a look and explore it. So far I've just talked about carbon, but a fundamental part of this analysis is what we call beyond carbon. And as the name implies, this is a focus on how climate solutions impact societal priorities beyond carbon emissions. So this includes impacts on equity, the larger environment, public health, and the economy. A group of researchers led by Michael Oxman and Dr. Beryl Toktai at Georgia Tech's Scheller Business School, as well as some key community partners like the Partnership for Southern Equity and Southface and Greenlink Analytics, they helped to map beyond carbon impacts to each of our 20 solutions. So for example, what are the air and water quality impacts of scaling a solution? Is the solution affordable and accessible? Would scaling the solution create local jobs? And what are the demographics seeing job impacts in those sectors today? What are the anticipated impacts on property values and in what neighborhoods? Are there public health impacts, such as impacts on premature mortality or morbidity? Does the solution impact quality of life or public safety? And does deployment require new educational outreach to stakeholders? I know I keep referring people back to the website, but we have put all of this up on drawdowngA.org, and you can see how all 20 solutions map to these indicators. I'm going to quickly focus on 3 solution examples: electric vehicles, large-scale solar, and refrigerant management, to kind of give you a sense of what this all looks like. Okay, first, electric vehicles. So electric vehicles are simply vehicles powered by electric batteries instead of conventional fuels like gasoline or diesel. And because the electric grid is cleaner than oil products, these cars have lower emissions. And this is increasingly true as more renewable and low carbon power generation is added to the grid. In Georgia, there are about 14,000 EVs registered in the state as of 2018. Many of those purchases were incentivized by a state tax credit, which the state legislature has actually repealed in 2015. The credit had provided up to $5,000 for EV purchases. And when it was repealed, it was replaced actually with an annual $200 user fee. With Georgia's power generation mix, EVs are already a lower carbon transportation option, which, as I mentioned, will continue to outperform traditional vehicles as carbon emissions on the grid fall. We estimated that you could reduce a megaton of emissions in the state by replacing 250,000 gasoline-powered vehicles with EVs by 2030. So the Beyond Carbon analysis highlights the environmental and public health benefits that stem from localized air quality improvements. And we note that this solution could create jobs associated with the manufacturing, the selling, installing, and maintaining of batteries and other EV components. EV battery jobs were in the news just this week as the multi-billion-dollar deal to build a new battery plant in Commerce and bring thousands of jobs moved forward. There are, however, some issues to watch. This includes how we dispose of batteries at the end of their life. Recycling is really important here. Where charging infrastructure is built out, is it accessible to all Georgians, including people in rural or historically under-resourced communities? And cost, the upfront cost of a new electric vehicle, they're coming down, but historically, they have been more expensive than traditional vehicles. State and federal EV tax credits can help defray upfront costs, as can the creation of vibrant resale markets. Okay, next up, large-scale solar, which we define as utility scale and community scale solar PV systems. As of mid-2019, Georgia had more than 1,500 megawatts of solar PV capacity, almost all of which was utility scale installation. And more of that is coming. The 2019 IRP for Georgia Power, which is the planning document that gets approved by the Public Service Commission, included about 2,000 megawatts of new utility scale solar by 2022. And this is meaningful. As you can see in the 2030 megaton estimate, we could reduce 1 megaton of CO2 by adding 10 new 100 megawatt utility scale solar installations, as well as 36 new 5 megawatt community solar installations. And for those doing the quick math in their head, that's about 1,180 megawatts. But we know we could actually do much more. Under those achievable scenario projections that I showed you earlier on that wedge graph, we actually estimate that large-scale solar could help cut emissions by about 11 million metric tons by 2030 if we scale up faster. But we want to scale solutions like solar thoughtfully. As we highlight in the Beyond Carbon analysis, replacing fossil fuels with solar can improve air quality, which has both environmental and public health benefits. And constructing new solar facilities can create new jobs. The 2019 solar jobs census shows that there are already 270 solar companies operating in the state. But there's an opportunity to diversify the solar workforce. That same report found that the solar workforce in Georgia is largely white and male. Women comprise only 26% of the state's solar workforce, and 73% of that workforce is white. Finally, we flag some issues to watch around end-of-life disposability of solar panels, land choices for siting facilities, and water usage related to cleaning panels. All right, I'm going to do one more, which happens to be one of my favorite solutions, refrigerant management, which is focused on replacing the class of chemicals known as hydrofluorocarbons, which are used to cool refrigerators and air conditioners. So we started using HFCs in a big way as a replacement for a different problematic class of refrigerants called CFCs. And you may recall that this old class CFCs were actually phased out after it was discovered that they were rapidly depleting the ozone layer. So ramping up HFCs allowed us to ramp down CFCs, and the ozone layer endured. Unfortunately, it led to another problem, as HFCs have extremely high global warming potential, thousands of times the heat trapping potential of CO2. And I wanted to highlight this one because we actually have new bipartisan congressional action signed into law under the last administration to take action. The 2020 Omnibus Bill, which is that big budget package that was passed by the last Congress, it included legislation calling on the US Environmental Protection Agency to regulate HFCs and ramp down national usage by 40% by 2024 and 85% by 2036. This is a big deal. We estimated prior to the omnibus that a 1 megaton reduction could be achieved by reducing leakage rates by 8% in all Georgia's grocery stores. We should be seeing much larger action now. As for beyond carbon, we found that replacing HFCs could have positive indoor air quality benefits. More efficient technologies could lower energy bills. But as we saw with this last transition of chemicals, how we do this transition is important. And it will still be important to have proper installation and disposal of new chemical agents. A new round of research is currently underway. And once again, it's being led by Dr. Marilyn Brown at Georgia Tech. I'm going to give you a very quick preview of what's to come and hopefully what you'll be hearing more about in coming days. So the team is working to build a new public-facing geospatial tool that tracks greenhouse gas emissions in Georgia at the county level. And this data will be updated monthly and segmented by class of emitters to the extent possible. So for example, you'll be able to see a map that shows electricity sector emissions by county or industry emissions by county, and it will be a public tool. Second, a team at the Ray C. Anderson Center for Sustainable Business at Georgia Tech is leading some work with the state's business community, thinking through how businesses in Georgia can collectively support Drawdown Georgia's solutions and work to reduce emissions coming from their individual businesses. Finally, there's some work underway in the public policy arena, thinking through pathways for solution activation for a handful of the 20 high impact solutions. And lastly, Drawdown Georgia, while it's really grounded in research and why that's the focus of my talk today, we hope that it will reach far beyond academic institutions. We hope people throughout the state will utilize the information to help scale climate solutions and help reduce emissions in our state. I'm going to quickly run through 3 small ways that allow you to stay connected to this effort. And these are all in addition to the really great programmatic work that GIPL is leading in this space to support individuals and congregations working to scale solutions in their communities and houses of worship. So one way to get involved is to go to our website, drawdownga.org, and sign up for our mailing list. We send out a newsletter twice a month that highlights what's going on with Drawdown Georgia, including links to our Drawdown Georgia blog, which you can also find on the website. In the newsletter, we also provide a roundup of climate news from around the state. And it'll be a great way to find out when our new webinar series officially launches, hopefully sometime this summer. So it's really just a great way to stay up to date on what's going on. You can also help us to build out a living database of climate solutions in the state through this kind of innovative crowd-solving app called GroupIt. And you can sign up for GroupIt once again on our website. It allows you to learn about projects to reduce emissions and increase carbon sinks in the state. It allows you to share information about projects that you're involved in and to help build this community of people in Georgia who are working to scale climate solutions. We're just getting started recruiting people to the site, but it's already been really exciting to see what people are sharing. And finally, Drawdown Georgia is collaborating with a group called Civic Dinners, And this is a platform that brings small groups of people together around issues that matter, which here is climate change. So Drawdown Georgia has a subscription to the program that's open for anyone to use. People can sign up for free to host or join the Civic Dinner. And if you're hosting, the platform provides a Zoom room as well as materials that we've created that really help people run a structured conversation. And this month, in honor of Earth Day, we're kicking off a new round of Civic Dinners. And people are raising their hands to host and attend dinners, which I will note are actually scheduled throughout the day, not just at dinner time. I'm hosting one on April 19th at 12 p.m. focused on electricity sector issues. Gipple is hosting one on May 11th at 6:30 p.m. And you can find the link to join those conversations on either the Drawdown Georgia or Civic Dinners website. And with that, I'll just close and say thank you to Gipple for hosting and for all of you for joining.